They threw my lunch in the trash, poured water on my books, and made me crawl under tables to pick up the mess while everyone filmed and laughed. But when that roaring Lamborghini screeched into our college parking lot and my billionaire father stepped out, their laughter died instantly. Hey everyone, I'm Jenny, and before we dive into this absolutely insane story that completely changed my life, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, what happened to me will blow your mind. And you definitely don't want to miss stories like this. I still remember walking through the gates of Westfield College for the first time. Those massive iron gates with gold lettering that screamed money and prestige. I felt like I was walking into a different world, and honestly, I was. While other students pulled up in shiny BMWs and brand new Audis, I had just gotten off my third bus of the morning. My backpack was 5 years old, held together with duct tape in 2 places, and my laptop was a hand-me-down from my cousin that took about 10 minutes just to boot up. But here's the thing. I earned my spot there. Full academic scholarship. Perfect grades throughout high school, volunteer work, leadership positions. I worked harder than anyone I knew just to get that acceptance letter. My mom worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, cleaning office buildings at night and serving coffee during the day. She never complained, never made me feel guilty about the sacrifices she made. She just smiled and said, education was the one thing no one could ever take away from me. Those first few weeks, I tried to blend in. I observed everything. The way these kids casually dropped hundreds of dollars on lunch like it was nothing. How they planned weekend trips to their parents' vacation homes. Amanda was the queen bee of our class. Designer handbags, perfect hair, and clothes that probably cost more than my mom made in a month. She had this way of looking at people like she was deciding if they were worth her time. Then there was Kyle, who drove a different luxury car every week. Monday might be a red Ferrari, Wednesday a white Porsche. He'd joke about having to choose which car to take, like it was some adorable problem we could all relate to. And Madison, who ran a fashion blog and seemed to document every outfit, every meal, every moment of her perfectly curated life. I ate lunch alone most days, finding quiet corners in the library or empty classrooms. Not because I was antisocial, but because their conversations felt like a foreign language. They talked about ski trips to Switzerland, shopping sprees in Paris, and which celebrity their parents had met at some charity gala. What was I going to contribute? Stories about my mom's double shifts or how excited I got when I found a decent used textbook online. The turning point came about a month into the semester. I was in the computer lab working on an assignment when I heard Amanda talking to her friends. They were planning some exclusive party, and she was going through the guest list on her phone. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but when you're the only other person in the room, it's hard not to hear. That's when she said it. We need to be careful about who we invite. I heard there are scholarship kids this year. You know how they get when they're around nice things. Probably never seen champagne that costs more than their monthly allowance. They all laughed, and something cold settled in my stomach. I kept typing, pretending I hadn't heard, but I knew. I knew they were talking about me. The harassment started small. Comments about my clothes, my backpack, the way I always brought lunch from home instead of buying from the expensive campus restaurants. Amanda would walk by my table in the cafeteria and make loud comments to her friends about people who don't belong and how some students clearly come from different backgrounds. The emphasis on different always stung. Then came the fake invitation. Amanda approached me after our economics class with the biggest smile I'd ever seen her wear. She handed me this beautiful cream-colored card with gold embossing. Her birthday party at her parents' estate. Dress code was cocktail attire. I was shocked, genuinely touched that she was including me. Maybe I had misjudged her. Maybe she wanted to be friends after all. I spent 2 weeks planning for that party. I borrowed a nice dress from my neighbor, saved money to get my hair done, even bought new shoes from a discount store that I thought looked expensive enough. I felt beautiful, confident, ready to finally fit in with these people who had seemed so far out of my reach. The humiliation still makes my cheeks burn when I think about it. I arrived at this mansion with perfectly manicured gardens and a circular driveway filled with luxury cars. But when I got to the door, the security guard looked at my invitation and shook his head. He made a phone call, and Amanda appeared in this stunning red dress, looking confused and slightly annoyed. "Oh," she said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "I think there's been a mistake. This party is for invited guests only." The cruelest part was her acting confused, like she had no idea how I got that invitation, like I had somehow forged it or stolen it. I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably just seconds, holding that beautiful invitation while she looked at me with fake concern and real disgust. I walked back to the bus stop in my borrowed dress and new shoes, trying not to cry until I was safely away from all those watching eyes. The worst part wasn't the embarrassment. It was that tiny part of me that had believed for just 2 weeks that I might actually belong somewhere like that. The real torture began after that night. Amanda made sure everyone knew what had happened. The story grew with each telling until I became this desperate scholarship girl who had crashed an exclusive party. In study groups, conversations would stop when I walked in. People would exchange glances, barely concealing their smirks. I started eating lunch in bathroom stalls just to avoid the cafeteria, but the absolute worst day of my life came during midterm week. I was already stressed, struggling to keep up with my damaged laptop and trying to rewrite notes that had gotten ruined in a previous accident involving Amanda's coffee cup and my backpack. I was sitting in the cafeteria, trying to eat quickly and get back to studying, when Amanda and her crew surrounded my table. "Look what we have here," Amanda announced, loud enough to get everyone's attention. "It's our little charity case, eating her sad little sandwich again." She picked up my lunch, this simple turkey sandwich my mom had packed for me, and held it up like evidence in a trial. "This is what poor people eat, everyone. Take notes." Before I could react, she threw my sandwich directly into the trash can across the room. It landed with this awful splat that seemed to echo through the suddenly quiet cafeteria. But she wasn't done. Madison grabbed my water bottle and poured it over my textbooks, my notebook, my laptop. The water spread across the table, soaking everything I needed for my afternoon exams. "Oops," Amanda said, not sounding sorry at all. "Looks like someone made a mess." Then Kyle chimed in, "Better clean that up before it stains the table. These tables probably cost more than your mom makes in a year." That's when I broke. I got down on my hands and knees, crawling under tables to collect my dripping textbooks, my destroyed notes, trying to save what I could of my laptop. The entire cafeteria was silent except for the clicking of phone cameras. Everyone was recording. Everyone was watching this girl in secondhand clothes crawl around on the floor like an animal while the rich kids laughed. Amanda stood over me, speaking just loud enough for her voice to carry. "This is what happens when people don't know their place. Some of us belong here and some of us are just visiting on borrowed time." Her words hit harder than the water, harder than the humiliation, because part of me wondered if she was right. I ran. I left everything and ran straight to the bathroom, locking myself in a stall and sobbing until I couldn't breathe. My laptop was probably ruined. My notes for 3 different classes were illegible, and tomorrow I had exams that would determine whether I could keep my scholarship. That night, I called my mom from my dorm room, ready to quit. Ready to come home and forget about college and dreams and trying to be something I wasn't. But when I heard her voice, tired from her double shift, but still gentle and loving, I couldn't do it. She had sacrificed too much. I couldn't give up because some spoiled kids decided I didn't deserve to be there. The strange phone call came 3 days later. I was in the library trying to use one of the public computers since mine was completely dead when my phone rang. The caller ID just said, "Unknown." I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Jenny?" The voice was warm, familiar, but I couldn't place it at first. "Sweetheart, how are you doing?" My heart stopped. I hadn't heard that voice in years, but I knew it instantly. "Dad?" I whispered, looking around to make sure no one could hear me. The conversation was brief, emotional, and completely unexpected. He was coming to visit. After years of minimal contact, years of him being this distant figure who sent birthday cards but never called, he was actually coming to see me. I told him I was fine, that everything was great, because that's what I always said. But something in my voice must have given me away. "I'll be there for the Parents' Day event next week," he said. "And Jenny? I'm proud of you. More proud than you know." I hung up feeling confused and emotional and hopeful in a way I hadn't felt in months. My classmates had been bragging about Parents' Day for weeks. Amanda's father was bringing his new yacht to the nearby marina. Kyle's dad was apparently driving up in some rare vintage car worth more than most people's houses. And my father, who I barely knew anymore, was coming to see me. The week leading up to Parents' Day was torture. Amanda made sure everyone knew that Parents' Day was when the real families showed up, when you could see who actually belonged at Westfield and who was just pretending. She made comments about how some people's parents probably couldn't even afford the parking fees, how embarrassing it must be to have your parents show up in some beat-up car. The morning of the event, I got another call. This time, my father asked me to meet him at the Grandview Hotel downtown. I had never been inside a place that fancy, with its marble floors and crystal chandeliers. But there he was, waiting for me in the lobby, looking exactly like I remembered but somehow more distinguished, more polished. He hugged me for the first time in years, and I almost started crying right there in that fancy lobby. We talked for hours. He explained that he had stayed away not because he didn't love me, but because he thought it was better for me to make my own way without his influence. He had built his company from nothing, just like my mother was raising me with nothing, and he wanted me to have that same strength. But he had been keeping track. He knew about my grades, my scholarship, even about what had been happening with Amanda and her friends. "I have people who keep an eye on things that matter to me," he said with a small smile, "and you, sweetheart, matter more than anything." He handed me a box containing a simple but elegant outfit, nothing flashy but clearly expensive. "For today," he said, "I want you to feel confident. But remember, the girl who earned that scholarship, who survived everything you've survived, she doesn't need designer clothes to be remarkable." When we arrived back at campus, I could feel the change immediately. I looked the same, more or less, but I felt different, stronger. Like I was carrying some secret knowledge that made all of Amanda's cruelty seem small and petty. The Parents' Day event was in full swing. Families were everywhere, touring the campus, meeting professors, showing off for each other. Amanda's father had indeed brought his yacht crew to give tours at the marina. Kyle was posing for pictures next to his dad's vintage Lamborghini. Madison's parents were dressed like they were attending a movie premiere. I stood off to the side, watching these displays of wealth and waiting for my father. Amanda noticed me and couldn't resist one final jab. She approached with her usual cruel smile, her parents trailing behind her like an entourage. "Well, well," she said, looking me up and down. "Look who cleaned up nicely. Let me guess, your mom saved up all year to buy you one decent outfit." Her parents laughed politely, like this was all good-natured teasing instead of months of systematic bullying. That's when we heard it. This deep, rumbling sound that seemed to shake the ground beneath our feet. Every head on campus turned toward the main entrance as the most beautiful silver Lamborghini I had ever seen came prowling through the gates. The engine noise was like thunder, announcing its arrival to everyone within a mile radius. The car pulled up right in front of the main building where we were all gathered. The engine shut off, and in the sudden silence, you could have heard a pin drop. Everyone was staring, phones were coming out, people were whispering about whose parent had arrived in such style. The door opened, and my father stepped out. He looked like he belonged in that car, belonged in that moment. Tall, confident, wearing a perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, but his eyes were scanning the crowd, looking for one person, looking for me. When our eyes met, his face broke into the warmest smile I had ever seen. He walked straight through that crowd of gawking students and their wealthy parents, straight to me, and wrapped me in the biggest hug of my life. "Sorry I'm late, sweetheart," he said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Traffic was terrible. The silence around us was deafening. I could see Amanda out of the corner of my eye, her mouth literally hanging open. Kyle looked like he had seen a ghost. Madison was frantically typing on her phone, probably trying to figure out who this man was. My father was gracious and kind, shaking hands with other parents, asking students about their studies, acting like the arrival hadn't caused a massive sensation. But I caught him glancing at Amanda and her crew with this knowing look, like he was filing away their faces for future reference. "Dad," I said quietly, "these are some of my classmates." I introduced them, watching as Amanda tried to transform from mean girl to sweet socialite in the span of seconds. She was suddenly all smiles and compliments, telling my father how wonderful I was, how lucky they were to have me in their class. Kyle was practically drooling over the car, asking about the engine, the specs, acting like we had been best friends all semester. Madison was complimenting my outfit, saying she had always loved my style, which was rich considering she had spent months mocking everything I wore. My father was polite, but distant, clearly seeing right through their sudden change in attitude. When Amanda's father approached, introducing himself as the CEO of some regional company, my father shook his hand with professional courtesy. But when Amanda's father started name-dropping and trying to impress him with business connections, my father just smiled and said, "That's nice." It wasn't until later, when someone finally Googled my father's name, that the real shock set in. He wasn't just wealthy, he was wealthy. Forbes list wealthy. His company had revolutionized an entire industry. He was worth more money than Amanda's, Kyle's, and Madison's families combined. The whispers started immediately. Students who had ignored me all semester were suddenly finding excuses to walk past our table. Professors who had barely noticed me were stopping to introduce themselves to my father. Amanda looked physically ill, probably realizing that every cruel comment, every humiliation, had been directed at someone whose family could buy and sell hers without thinking twice about it. But the most beautiful part wasn't the shock or the sudden attention. It was the quiet conversation my father and I had as we walked across campus together. He told me he had wanted to intervene so many times, had wanted to make those phone calls that would have stopped Amanda's behavior immediately, but he believed I needed to handle it myself, needed to prove to myself that I belonged there not because of his money, but because of who I was. "I'm proud of the person you've become," he said as we reached his car. "Not because you survived their cruelty, but because you survived it with your integrity intact. You could have used my name, my money, my influence at any point, but you chose to earn your place here. That's strength, Jenny. That's real character." As we drove away from campus, I saw Amanda standing with her parents, watching us go. The look on her face wasn't anger or embarrassment, it was something deeper. Recognition, maybe, that all her wealth and status and cruelty meant nothing when faced with someone who had real power and chose not to use it to hurt people. The rest of my time at Westfield was completely different, not because people suddenly respected my father's money, but because I finally understood my own worth. I didn't need their acceptance or approval. I had earned my place there through my own merit, and no amount of designer handbags or luxury cars could change that. And that's how one silver Lamborghini completely flipped my entire college experience upside down. If this story of ultimate karma gave you chills, smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible real-life stories. Comment below, what would you have done in my situation? Would you have revealed your family's wealth earlier? Hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads. Remember, never judge someone by their appearance. You never know what surprises they're hiding. Until next time.